Hey there, you guys. So today we're talking about evidence. Most specifically, we're talking about ways to avoid extensive plot summary and fact dumping. Okay, now, I will say, if you got a comment about using too much data, that's essentially the same thing as fact dumping. I felt like saying fact dump in a comment would have been, it would have felt too critical, and I don't mean it in that way. Right, so we are now looking to figure out how to take away some data, whether it's from a creative source or from a more technical source, right? How to take some of that out of our essay and then fill it in with our own ideas. So I'm going to address this separately, right? So first I'll deal with creative information, and then we'll talk about more technical, and then we'll kind of tie those together. Okay, so when it comes to creative information, whether it's a film or a book, right, you want to make sure that you don't just summarize the entire source and then throw your kind of analysis in there every once in a while. You want to make sure that your essay is presenting only the relevant information from your source. And think to yourself, well, does my reader need to know this in order to understand what I'm talking about here? If the answer to that is no, then leave it out. You don't need it. Right? You don't want to overload your reader and get them to the point where they're just sitting there like, well, we're still talking about that thing, I'm falling asleep. Right? We don't want our reader to fall asleep because of extensive summary with things that they don't need to work with. Right? So give them the bare bones. Give the reader the most relevant information and then move on and say what that means for the reader. Same thing for just more general fact dumping. I saw this a lot in terms of comparing and contrasting two types of foods, or in comparing and contrasting technology, whatever that type of technology is, whether it's like a computer product or a car, right? It's very easy to just fall into the trap of, well, let me tell you about how this works, which isn't exactly what this essay is meant to do, even if how it works is an inherent contrast. Right, what we're trying to do is say, okay, so as a user of this technology or as a chef of this type of food, right, we do this thing, right? If it's a car, for example, we hit the gas pedal, this thing happens with this thing. Okay, awesome. Obviously, I know a lot about cars, right? So you hit the gas pedal, and these two things happen in the engine. Awesome. Okay, cool. So now what does that mean to me as a reader as I'm reading this? Well, maybe I've just put some new knowledge in my database, in my brain, but at the same time, do I need to know that, right? You need to think about your audience. What does your audience care about, right? And your audience cares about how it impacts them. I would say 99.9% of the time, your audience will just be a user of whatever type of technology you're working with, right? Whether it's a car or a phone or a computer or a gaming console even, right? So just listing a bunch of information isn't really going to tell the reader anything, right? You say a piece of information and then you explain what it does. Let's use an example of cooking from a recipe, right? You add a particular spice into one type of food. Okay, cool. Don't give me, the entire rundown of the recipe. You add 3 tablespoons of this, and then you do this, and then you do this. That doesn't matter. Pick out something important, right? You add, a pinch of cilantro. Okay, cool. Sounds awesome. Then you should tell me, what does that mean for me as someone who's going to eat this food, right? What does that cilantro do to the food? Right? Does it spice it up? Does it make it tangy? Does it make it bitter? What does it do to the taste? Right? That's the thing that your audience is interested in. So that's what you want to focus on. Similarly, if you're talking about a gaming console, for example, and you're talking about the refresh rate, okay? Great that things refresh quickly, but what does that mean for the person who's gaming? Right? Why is that important? And what is that going to do, for someone who's coming into this to kind of find out information about these two topics? So you need to think, whether you're working with creative content or you're working with technical content, whatever that type of technical content is, what does this information mean to my audience? And what do they want to know? What do they need to know to be able to understand what I'm trying to say? In this case, how can I make sure that they understand differences without going overboard, right? We only, as readers, need a few main pieces of information in order to truly understand, kind of the overall concept. Brains are great. We fill in gaps. We make assumptions. Now, I've always said, don't let your reader make assumptions, but when it comes to pointing out specific things and then you focusing on those to develop further, your reader's not going to say, well, why didn't they talk about the parsley that they also told me to put in with the cilantro? They're not going to say that because you're talking about the cilantro. Also, I don't know of any dish that calls for both parsley and cilantro. Just saying. But, you really want to think, what does my reader need to know? Why do they need to know it? When it comes to creative content, it's about what is it that the viewer or the reader is getting out of this information, right? What is it that this particular scene tells the reader about the overall story? Okay, so you want to keep those things in mind. It's about what the reader needs to know to be able to get out of your essay the most important thing to them. All right, so that's going to be the big thing. That'll help you eliminate that sort of plot summary issue and the fact dump, right? Focus on specific instances and then develop what those instances mean in terms of the bigger picture, whether it's the overall story of a particular film or book, or it's the final product of the recipe, or it's, what the car does when the user, the driver, hits the gas pedal, right? Because those are the relevant things. All right, so make sure that you stick with that relevant information for your reader, and they will thank you, okay? Especially in an essay like this where there's a lot of information, a lot of conclusions that you, as a writer, draw through for your reader about those differences. All right, so I hope that helps you guys kind of understand how to avoid those pitfalls of fact dumping and plot summary. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I am happy to help you however you need. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, do awesome things, and I will see you next time. Bye.